Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the kickoff webinar for the History Matters 2025 campaign with SAA, ACRA, and the SHA. We're glad you're here. We meet and we're doing this in a time of extraordinary change and uncertainty, which is the big part of the reason that we're doing this campaign. And we need all the help for advocacy that we can get. A few housekeeping notes before we start. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted on our website for everyone to access later on. We will be sending all the registrants an email link with the recording link so that people can watch it whenever they choose. Also, you can use our Q&A function to type in questions for our panelists. And at the end of the presentation, we will go through the questions and try to answer as many as we can before the end. So with all that out of the way, let's start off with introductions. Una?
Hi, I'm Una Schmid. I'm the Executive Director for the Society of American Archaeology.
Andrew?
Good afternoon. I'm Andrew Goldberg with Agora Consulting and run federal government relations for the American Cultural Resources Association. Glad you're here.
And Amanda.
Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Stratton, and I am the Executive Director of the American Cultural Resources Association, otherwise known as ACRA.
Great, thank you. So to start off our program, I'll turn it over to Una.
Hey, thanks so much, David. And David is our Manager of Government Affairs at the Society of American Archaeology, and we are enormously grateful for his incredibly hard work, especially since January 20th. So I just am quickly going over the context of why. Why should we be doing a campaign on History Matters? And I think there are two ways to answer this. One is from the point of view of your policymakers, so I call this the view from the Hill. And this is the idea that you have policymakers that are, especially in red states, but really across America, facing untoward amounts of anger. And what we want to do is really provide them with a quick and easy win around archaeology. Oh, excuse me, I did not mean to do that. Let me go up. Sorry about that. And to really help them get some positive visibility in their communities, because we have such an amazing story to tell on behalf of the members of SAA, SHA, and ACRA. From the point of view of the historic mill or the constituent, advocacy matters more than ever before. We are going into a funding cycle that is going to increase pressure from the federal, state, and local levels. The funding to your site, to your programs, to your field school, to your collections, to your museum, to your historic house, this funding is going to be a lot harder to get reinstated than to defend. So this summer, especially during the August recess, is a terrific time prior to FY26 to really help make a case for why the work that you do as a preservation professional, the work you do matters and matters to your policymaker in terms of the impacts that you bring to your district. So we're talking about the fact that we would like you to invite them to come out to your site, to see the great stuff you do, to really educate them about the money that you spend at your local hardware store, the number of school kids that come through your collection or your historic home. Really show them the value that you are bringing for the district. So now we're going to get into how you can participate in History Matters.
Okay, and that's me. I'm going to tell you about how to schedule these project visits. So as you can see, we have called them project visits. These are different than in-district meetings that would happen in the legislator's office. Some of you may remember we actually did this campaign, SAA and ACRA, back in 2019. And this campaign specifically focuses on having the legislator come to you, whether that is your museum, your archaeological site, your historic house, any of these things, we want the legislator to come to you. The first thing that you need to do is submit a scheduling request that you need to let the legislator know and invite them. We do have a sample scheduling request that we have provided as a part of our toolkit. And an important part is with that sample, make sure to personalize it, making it both local and relevant to the legislator. When you're submitting the scheduling request, you're going to submit it to their scheduler, and you're going to want to be flexible on the time and date. We do recommend submitting the scheduling request, earlier on in the summer. You could even get off this call and immediately submit the scheduling request to your legislator. The majority of these visits will likely happen during what's called the August recess. That is the longest period of time that legislators will be back home in their districts. They're usually home for the entire month of August into September for a few days. But it doesn't mean that this visit has to happen during that recess. If they offer you a time in the end of June, middle of July, when the legislator happens to be home, then take them up on that. The campaign can run the whole summer. An important part of after you submitting your schedule request is to follow up with the scheduler. The schedulers get many meeting requests, both in DC and within the district itself. So persistence is key to making sure that you are able to get your meeting scheduled. And then you're going to work on developing your talking points. We are going to talk a little bit more about this later. Andrew's going to cover conveying your message, but you are going to want to make sure to talk about why the project matters to the district. Keeping it local to the community, talk about the educational value, the cultural value. You want to talk about how it connects to the federal policies, things like HPF funding, Historic Preservation Fund funding, which many of you have heard a lot of talk about in the recent days, and you will continue to hear a lot of talk about coming up. An important thing about your talking points is SAA, ACRA, and SHA can help you develop those. If you have questions on what you want to talk about during your visit, let us know. We're happy to talk you through that once you have it scheduled. So next slide. Okay, also before your meeting, after you develop your talking points, you're going to want to develop your event agenda. So basically how your event is going to roll out. What is going to happen when the legislator walks in the door? Where will you meet them? What staff will be there to greet them? What path will you take? Where are good places for photos? Because these are great photo ops. As Una talked about, we want to offer that soft touch point, a positive interaction with the legislator's office in a time when a lot of coverage is negative and divided. That will help to increase the relationship. Providing that positive press will provide them with a positive experience, and that's more likely to continue to engage with us. And you want to make sure to alert the legislator's office ahead of time to any sensitive issues regarding human remains that may be at the site, anything else that you may want to make sure that they are aware of. So during your meeting, what's going to happen? You can follow your event agenda. You've already laid that out. You have your talking points, but you want to be flexible. The legislator may have questions or may want to go a different path than you initially laid out. So be flexible on that plan. You are going to want to swap your contact information with the legislative staff in attendance because that is who you are going to follow up with. This will most likely be some of their district staff. And when you're going through your event agenda and your talking points, it's okay to not know the answers to all of the questions that the legislator may ask, especially if they are policy related. But the important thing is do not make up answers. It actually provides a really good opportunity for follow-up. So you can have a staff follow-up if it's policy related, and then you can address those when you do the thank you email for them visiting. You also remember you've already identified the places that are great for photos. Take those photos so that way they can be shared on social media and with the legislator. So after your meeting, you've collected that contact information, send that thank you email. This is an important part to maintaining that relationship. You can post the photos on social media. We have a hashtag that you are able to use, hashtag History Matters. And then you can actually customize that further down to History Matters in Maryland or History Matters in Cincinnati, all in order to make sure that people are able to connect that with their local community. And another very important part, please send the photos and the visit summary to the respective organizations, ACRA, SHA, and or SHA. We are, we will be featuring the successful and, completed meetings on our various accounts on social media and things like that. We want to celebrate your hard work and the relationships that you're building. So I think the next slide takes it over to Andrew, so I'll pass it over to him.
Great. Thank you so much, Amanda, and thank you, everyone, for joining us today. What I want to talk about is how we convey our message when we're in those meetings. Obviously, the reason we do this, we want everyone to do this. The ultimate goal is about advocacy on policy. We want good policy outcomes from Congress, the state level, local level. Of course, that's where we want to go. But the strategy with these meetings is to really make them more about the education as opposed to the advocacy. And what I mean about by that is this: if with everything that's going on, I think there definitely is that desire to really hit elected leaders, especially at the federal level, with talking about all the challenges, all the issues, how we want them to vote. And we understand that, of course. But that doesn't, it doesn't really get to how we educate them. And as Una pointed out, members of Congress these days are getting a lot of grief from a lot of parts of their constituents about a lot of issues. What we're trying to create is the opportunity where a member of Congress or a state legislator or someone like that feels comfortable and wants to take part in an interesting event that they can then put out on social media or things like that. And we want to use it as an opportunity to really build a relationship and help members of Congress understand what it is that archaeologists and other CRM professionals do. So there is going to be some advocacy. We'll talk about how to do that, but the real focus we want is to talk about the projects, what's happening in the district, in the state, the work that you're actually doing, which then creates the opportunity to then talk and begin the discussion about the federal policies and where we want them to go. So it's very different than the typical kind of meetings where, say, you go to Capitol Hill in Washington and have your issues you ask them to vote for back in the district. This is a little different because the focus is really going to be on educating and opening their minds and their view about the importance of what you do. So to begin with, I'll say this: the bulk of the messaging is going to be the project and what you're doing. If you can go back one slide, just really quick, is about the project itself and what's going on there. And then talking more about kind of how that ties into advocacy. First thing I'll say, as with any message, any way you're communicating, whether it's about a specific project, about the work you do, about the profession, about your company, and yes, about the issues, it's important to kind of think beforehand about what you're going to say and how you're going to say it. The best messages are those that are concise, that get to the point clearly, that are sincere. One huge advantage that you have is I'm going to assume here that everybody is passionate about the work that they do and really enjoys and cares very much for the projects they work on. Letting that sincerity, that passion come through is really important. Make sure it's targeted to the audience. And this really goes a lot with the next one, which is plain English. We want to make sure that we're explaining things in a way that makes sense. So, for example, on this call, we may say things like SHPOs and TIPOs, HTC, HPF, all the acronyms. When talking with members of Congress, they may not know that. So really speaking, very clearly and plainly about the projects, why they matter to the community and to the country is really important. Keeping it positive. And yes, I know that in these days, sometimes that can feel difficult to stay positive when there's a lot of challenges out there. But as we'll talk about on the next slide, there really is a benefit to keeping it at a very positive level. Again, we're trying to create a good experience where the members of Congress get what you do, get the importance of it, and then want to work with you. And like I said, at the end has a call to action. And that's kind of where some of that advocacy comes in perhaps a lighter touch than you might do on a meeting on Capitol Hill. But it's still very important to continue the conversation. So a couple of ways to do that. And if you go to the next slide, there you go. I call this kind of how to advocate without sounding like you're advocating. In other words, you're not going there and saying, you need to vote for this bill or vote against this amendment. It's really about doing it in a much softer way. So the first thing, of course, is connecting the policy to the project or the project to the policy. So, for example, the project that you show them is happening because of, say, the historic tax credit, or it's funding that came, or support from the SHPO that came to the Historic Preservation Fund, point that out. Make sure you say this is not just some random project that's happening unrelated to what's happening with the federal government, tie it back to, hey, this great thing that's happening here is happening because of the funding that comes from the Historic Preservation Fund or this program. That's really important. So you get the light bulb going off in their head saying, oh, the stuff that I vote on back in DC actually impacts what's happening on the ground. Second, keeping it local, keeping it focused on the district or the state or the region. Sometimes that's simply a matter of talking about how federal policies really affect what's happening in your community. Yes, it is true. The Historic Preservation Fund is important for communities across the country. Historic tax credit, all these programs, the work that happens at Interior and National Park Service, Section 106, they matter all over the country. But it's really good, as much as you can, to keep it local to how it impacts you in your state, your community, the district. As I said, trying to accentuate the positive. It is one of the tricks we try to do is putting things in the positive spin. So talking about how Historic Preservation Fund makes it possible to protect certain sites or make sure certain work goes forward. It's always a little better than saying, well, the doom and gloom, saying, well, if this is canceled or if the XPF goes away, this bad thing will happen. There's a time for that, and we'll probably be getting to that as we go with our advocacy. But the more you can keep it in a very positive way, again, you reinforce the important nature of what we're doing and create that better, stronger event and that experience, and that memory, that understanding in the policymaker. Like I said, try to avoid jargon as much as possible. Beyond accentuating the positive, I'd say remaining positive. There's some members of Congress you might meet with who already are supportive of preservation funding and other programs. There's some who might not be, even if they're not, even if they are skeptical or things like that. It's what's important to remain positive. You're trying to build a long-term relationship and break down perhaps some of that lack of knowledge or lack of trust. And so keeping it as a very positive way really helps can build that relationship. And last but not least, and this is the most important thing, is offer to continue the conversation. So like I said, you don't want to go in there saying you must vote for this bill or sign this thing, but certainly as things wrap up, as you get towards the end of the event, saying, we'd love to, continue the conversation, love to talk with you more about how historic tax credit is so important. We'll talk to you about how making sure that the Historic Preservation Fund gets its full funding in the next budget, things like that. It's helpful. Again, it kind of ties all the great stuff you showed them to why they're there, why you're talking to them, why the policy matters. Like I said, it's not a hard sell, it's more of a softer sell. And the point to remember is that this is not the be all and end all of the relationship. This is not have them see a site and then never see them again. We want to find those ways and work on ways to continue building that relationship so that when you go to Washington and meet with them in their office, or you meet with them in their district office, you can go back and say, hey, remember last year when we showed you that site where all these great things happened? And, I talked about how that happened because Historic Preservation Fund, there was a grant program that provided that funding. Well, right now, there's an opportunity you have as a member of Congress now to continue to support that funding so we can keep doing it. And that's the point, most important point, that this is not the be all and end all of the relationship. This is a step of breaking down some of that lack of knowledge, lack of trust, and beginning to really help them understand in a very real way why this work matters, why this program matters, and how you can work with them. So like I said, the idea is not that you're not advocating. This is all about advocacy and ultimately about getting towards a better policy outcome, but using the events as a way to really create a positive, fun event they want to put up on social media and talk about, and position yourself as someone, an authority whom they can turn to in a trusting way to know that you want to work with them towards better policy outcomes. And so that's really kind of what we want to do. And as we've said, Una, David, Amanda, myself, we all, folks at SHA, really want to help you. As you do this, we can help you with policy, talking points and things like that. But the opportunity to do this, it's always important, but certainly right now, it's really important to do that education process. So we're really glad you're here. And with that, I think I'll turn it back to David.
As Andrew said, this is just, it's meant to be the start of a relationship, not a one-off event. and I should mention that in addition to sending everyone the link to the recording of the webinar, we are also going to be sending out a toolkit filled to all the registrants with background information about what we've discussed, along with sample talking points, template invitation letters you can use in contacting your elected representatives, and as well as some sample social media posts that you can use following your meetings with these policymakers. And so when you do schedule these things, please let me know at David Lindsay, David_Lindsay, LINDSAY at SAA.org, or to Andrew or Amanda, and I will make sure that all of us we will keep a master list of all the scheduled events and with whom you're meeting. And not to put too fine a point on it, but the reason we need to do this is pretty obvious. The president's FY26 budget request would essentially zero out the SHPO and THPO funding. So it's more imperative than ever that legislators, decision makers at every level of government understand the value of what you guys do. Not just for the science, not just for the history and the culture, but also the economic aspect as well. So without further ado, maybe we can get to some of these questions. Here's one. We understand the House will finish its FY26 budget before the August recess. Should we act sooner rather than later? And I'll leave that to Amanda and Andrew.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, I'll start. Yeah, I mean, one thing that I've learned time is trying to predict when Congress will finish its work is usually not a good idea, because it is hard to predict. I think the goal of Congress is to finish what's being called the big, beautiful bill, which is a much larger bill involving tax and a lot of other things, by the August recess, although it's not clear they can do that. Typically, they will go right up to September, the end of the fiscal year, and frankly, often well past the end of the fiscal year into the next year before they do the budget. So, what I would say is I think these meetings, it's important whenever they can happen to do them. August is really the best time because they are going to be home for about 4 to 5 weeks, or at least in the district, 4 to 5 weeks. And so there's a block. Now, if you reach out to the scheduler today and they say, hey, we'd love for the congressman to do this in May or in June, and they have other recesses, well, great. We typically aim for August because that is where there's the most flexibility, the most time when members have a chance to do that. And what I'd say to the question, I think, because we don't really know the time frame of when Congress is going to finish this aspect of the budget or that, we don't want to tie too much to making those assumptions. We're really focusing on when it's best for members of Congress to see this and have the time to really do it is best. But like I said, if they're interested and say, hey, we have time on this, the congressman will be in your area, or the senator, during the Memorial Day recess, for example, if it works for you, please go ahead.
Well, and if I could follow up, Andrew, real quick. Oh, sorry. I also wanted to note, Andrew just mentioned, what they are calling the big, beautiful bill. That is different than the budget process for fiscal year 26. That is it's a bill that you might also see referred to as reconciliation. And the appropriations process for fiscal year 26 is separate from that. And like Andrew mentioned, that is usually a process that goes right until the end of the fiscal year, if not beyond. Many times, especially in recent years, it has been beyond.
Yeah.
I just want to thank both of you. Excellent information. I did also want to tell our listeners and viewers that you should really reach out to your legislators right away. You're going to want time to follow up. We talk about the August recess. That time block is going to get scheduled up very fast. There's a reason why we're holding this webinar in early May. We're really encouraging our members to go out and request these meetings right away.
Okay, next question. What advice is the ACHP providing to the President and Congress with respect to the Historic Preservation Fund? I'll take the first crack at it, then Andrew and Amanda can come in. I'm not sure they're providing any advice. As you may or may not know, the ACPF basically had near all but two of its voting members or panelist members resign or be fired from the council. So at the moment, they don't, I think, even have a quorum. So I mean, yes, the professional staff at HPF is undoubtedly trying to talk to the White House. I know that Doge has visited the ACHP, but as to what precisely they're telling the administration, I don't know. Andrew?
No, I think that's I think you covered it really well. I think this is one of those periods also when there's so much churn happening on the executive branch side, including agencies like ACHP. It's more important than ever for those of us who are out here in the association world, practitioners, businesses, advocates, to be working and doing this stuff, because we can't necessarily, count on the ability of folks in the agencies to be speaking out at this point.
And I will also note that it is important to remember that the president's budget is a request. It's a proposed budget that he provides to Congress. It is not necessarily what Congress adopts. So, this has certainly been the case in the past. I believe it was the last budget that President Trump proposed to Congress when he was in his previous term. Proposed, I think it was 44 million, Andrew, for the HPF?
40 million, I think, 40
Yes,
point.
yes, and Congress provided significantly beyond that. So that's an important thing to remember, that it's not just because the president is proposing it doesn't mean it's going to be that way. There are some other questions about, how Congress and the president are working together and how the administration plans to spend money that we could get into, but that would make this a very long webinar. And we do want to try and focus our questions on this campaign rather than the larger legislative and administrative actions right now.
Right. As one person asked, when you say to follow up repeatedly with schedulers, how often is that? Once a week or more or less?
I'm happy to take that. And it's actually going to depend a little bit. If you don't have a set timeline as to when the legislator needs to come, then I would say you do your first follow-up about 2 to 3 weeks after you send the meeting request. So, every 2 weeks or so, if you don't have a set timeline on that, because you don't want to annoy the scheduler, because that will make it to the point that you definitely will not get a meeting. However, if you have a project that has a set time period that the legislator would need to visit in, so say you're doing an archaeological dig for 2 weeks, and that would be the time that the legislator needed to visit, you can increase the number of check-ins on that a little bit, especially as it gets closer to your project getting underway.
Okay, this is somewhat related. Are there any plans to launch as part of this, I guess, a phone bank campaign to Capitol Hill?
I'll start with that. I think all of the organizations, and that includes all of us, are, taking a number of steps to make sure that our members are reaching folks on Capitol Hill through action alerts, where we ask members to contact their representatives by phone, email, etc. Certainly engaging with specific members of SAA or ACRA who are in the districts of key members of Congress. So I think the answer is we're doing all of those different tactics, and certainly the work that folks like David and myself and others do, here in Washington, to engage directly. The reason we're doing this one is because what this does is it really helps level set to get to a place where all members of Congress, or as many as possible, understand and know these issues. Last time Congress, I believe last time they actually debated any legislation on NHPA was 1992 or abouts. So, I mean, pretty much every member of Congress has never worked on it. Many of them have never heard of this, a lot of these things, or don't really understand it. And so, all those phone calls and the letters and the emails, those are very important. But what we're doing here, one of the reasons we do this is to also make sure that that basic education, so that when those letters and those calls come in, they know, oh, I get what this program is for and why it matters.
Yeah, this is by no means the only advocacy actions we are asking members to take. You are going to see many calls over, over a number of issues for, the next few months, where we are asking you to contact your member of Congress via email or phone or something along those lines. Like, this is one tool in that toolbox, and like Andrew said, is very, very important for the education aspect, as well as showing the legislator how important it is specifically to the local community that they represent. That this just isn't just some amorphous thing happening in other places within the country.
And here's another one. What do you think about reaching out to Congress people who have a track record of working with historic resources in their districts, like Senator Fetterman and others, separately from a specific project about this campaign?
Well, and I think our answers to the last question kind of touched on that. We are going to be doing that as well. It's not going to be only this campaign is going to be the only touch with legislators. Not only from us asking you all as advocates and practitioners to do that, but us, the staff here in DC, are going to be continually engaging with legislative offices as well.
And I would just
And I'll
add,
just,
oh, go ahead,
oh,
Una.
sorry,
No, I'll
I
just
was
add
just
to that.
going to chime in, point out that our members have really amazing things to show policymakers, and everyone really values the sense of place, the sense of what makes their hometown special, their sense of pride in their district. And I think it is really, really important that we not lose sight of the fact that this is a bipartisan opportunity. The people that control the current houses are Republican right now, and it is really especially important that we help Republican policymakers get excited and become more aware of what our members do and how this is unbelievably valuable to the school kids that come to your site, the students that are getting trained up in your field school. If you run a collection and you have volunteers, how many volunteer hours, that speaks to passion and to how meaningful your collection is in your community. If you're spending dollars on your site, talk about the dollars you're spending in that neighborhood. In other words, this is really an opportunity to reach all policymakers, regardless of what their past histories are and regardless of which party affiliation they have, because all these policymakers have the opportunity to help us once you get to the policy ask.
How long should a project visit be? Is that something that the scheduler or the representative scheduler will determine?
So usually that is going to be at the discretion of the scheduler. They'll tell you, the legislator has this amount of time available. Usually, for project visits, it's gonna be a little bit longer than you would have, say, a meeting on Capitol Hill. Meeting on Capitol Hill, you're doing 15 to 30 minutes, if that. Project visits, you're normally going to see about 30 minutes to an hour. But again, it's going to depend on the legislator's schedule, how much time they have available. Because we mentioned being persistent and having to follow up because they're getting a lot of scheduling requests. Just because they're back home doesn't mean they're not busy and meeting with their constituents.
What is the best way to get information about local impacts? For example, how much money for SHPOs and THPOs go to a given state? Zeroing out means what exactly on a state-to-state basis?
I mean, I will say that, we work very closely with groups like Nick SHPO, the Organization for SHPOs, and NAFPO, the Organization for THPOs, who have a lot of that information, National Trust. So there are a lot of resources, and what I would suggest is, and in addition to your state, SHPO may have some of that information as well. What I would suggest is, as you're planning, if you get one of these events scheduled and you want to get some information, either reaching out to, David or myself, we can kind of provide some more state specific information, or at least get you to that information. But I think that certainly, is a place. And not only that, they also have examples of actual projects beyond what you're working on in the state or the area that can kind of also help illuminate the importance of these programs, this funding to their state and to the district.
Yeah, we can definitely provide you with a good bit of that information. The SHPOs are allocated, their funding is allocated by a formula. The THPOs, I think it largely depends. The average for each tribe, I think, is about 102,000 or something like that. But we can definitely get you that specific information if you contact us and let us know what's helping. We can help you build your talking points for your visit. And don't forget, if you are a museum curator, if you run a collections facility, anything like that, those are places also that legislators and mayors and other people can come and see what goes on and what you do and why it's important. It's not just dig sites. Okay. That's the last one that I had.
Actually, there's one other question I noticed was
Sure.
about, if I could just, I want to make a point about that is, I think it's
No, we
about,
just got another one. Go ahead. You finish, Andrew, then I'll
okay,
do.
sure. It's asked about, the importance of inviting state legislators also.
Right.
I think is great. My one piece of advice is, and this may sound a little bit silly, but if you say do an event and you invite, a member of Congress, then you decide you want to maybe invite state reps, check with the member of Congress staff first. I hate to acknowledge it, but there are some folks who don't always play nicely and don't always want to be together. And so I think my advice is, decide who the focus is, which elected official is, and then if you want to invite more, talk to their staff about that. There sometimes are these like local political issues, but beyond that, I would say yes, absolutely, doing this and engaging with the state level representatives, local, all of that is important because it matters really at all levels of government.
Can you walk through an example visit, either a fictional one or one that's based on past experience?
Yeah, maybe we should have done that role play that we initially had discussed. I think our slides kind of took you through what this looks like. But you would start with greeting the legislator at the agreed position, and then beginning to walk them through the planned route of your site. You would want to start off with explaining exactly what the project or what the project is or the museum's focus, giving a description of exactly where they are and what the importance is to the local community. Once you've gone through the local community, these exact specifics about the site, that is when, more towards the end of the visit, you would want to go and talk about any of the particular policy aspects that you may want to ask, as well as ending with that call to action that Andrew talked about. You would also want to more than likely end the visit with the photos, because that's usually a signaling when the legislator is getting ready to go. And then that is when you would do your thank yous and promises to follow up, and the legislator would depart. That was a very high level agenda. Andrew, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that I may have missed.
No, I think that's really it. I mean, obviously depends on what the site is. Is it a site that you kind of can walk through, or is it more static where you have to stand there and look at things? Generally the more hands-on, the better, because it really gets them to understand that. I recognize that many sites hands-on is not a good idea, but thinking about ways as much as you can, and certainly if there are other folks who are on the project working and having a chance for the member to talk, ask them questions. Certainly, job creation, jobs is always a big thing that politicians, care about. And so if you talk about, hey, we have all these people working on it, we have these interns, we have this, so that helps. But really it's how you would show anybody, I think, showing off what you do and really showing off why, what's happening, but also why, why it matters, why this project is important, because it's telling the story about the community or whatever. But I think the same way that you would really try to show off, it's a chance to show off essentially what you're doing and why it's important.
As one commenter notes, and I think it's important that everybody, the reason that reaching out to state legislators is also important is because SHPOs also receive a 40%, have to provide a 40% funding match in addition to the federal grant that they get. So state governments, state legislatures play a very important role in the SHPO side of the Historic Preservation Fund. Do we have any other questions that people would like to send in? Okay, here we go. Do you know if there are any members of Congress that already support this? If so, how many? Good question. Yes, in the House, there's a Historic Preservation Caucus. I believe it has about 65 to 70 members. It's not really clear, they are members of the Historic Preservation Caucus, and they do, at least on paper, support the HPF and its funding, and I'm sure they will when push comes to shove. I do know that there is a HPF support letter circulating around the House as we speak, I think, and that an HPF reauthorization bill is expected to be introduced soon. But yeah, it would be great if we had stronger support, and that's what a big part of this campaign is about. Andrew, do you have anything?
No, I totally agree with that. What I'd say is, even if you have a member of Congress who supports preservation programs, things like that, it's important to do this because it's not only want to show them, make sure they support it, but also make sure they see it's important, because there are a lot of programs and a lot of funding that Congress has to deal with, and so really impressing upon them the importance of being involved. And if they are somebody who already is very sympathetic and positive, trying to then down the line get them on as a co-sponsor of legislation that David talked about, or onto letters or things like that, could be really helpful. So the idea is we're trying to both get those who are sort of ignorant, let's say, about this to understand it, those who may already understand it to really support it, and those who just support it to become champions. So whatever stage they're at, you want to kind of keep building their understanding and their recognition of what you do.
So was there, okay. If your work relates to DEI, how should that best be approached? That's a tough one.
So, I mean, honestly, I might say, reach out to us. We could talk through it.
Right.
I will say this, on the Hill, at least, I think the views on this are maybe not as always as what you might expect based upon what we're hearing from the administration. And I'd also note that the administration is using a very expansive definition of DEI, which means almost anything at this point. What I'd say is that if your situation, or if you have, say, a member of Congress who you feel might be less supportive or even hostile to this, one thing you can always do is reach out to us, and we can talk through it. I mean, certainly we know who the players are, who the member of Congress are, and we can kind of work with you to make sure that you can do an event that really is successful and gets to the goals. And we certainly we want to help you do that.
Yeah, I would say that on the Hill, Andrew's right. On the Hill, the situation is not as strident one way or the other as it is maybe in the media or with this administration. And we can definitely find a message that will help you work through it. Will a copy of this PowerPoint be sent out? Una's nodding, so I guess that's a yes.
I don't see a problem.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I would say absolutely send it with the link to the recording and the link to the toolkit and the toolkit itself and the PowerPoint. Sure. I think it would be great.
What can be done to help our THPO colleagues through this time as their offices are already stretched thin?
I mean, I'll just reiterate that the goals of this campaign are for us to start making friends, start educating policymakers, because there are so many programs that are in peril. and they are just abstractions or acronyms to members of Congress when we get to the place of the take action. So it is fantastic for our members to take action and to phone offices and to visit legislators and to insist on what is important for us and our livelihoods. That's fantastic. But if we want to be realistic about the context that some of these policymakers are living in, they are getting a lot of calls from a lot of different constituents, and it is quite a tangle for them. So this is an opportunity to break through some of that static to really bring home in a very different way what SIPOs do that matter and why it matters and how and why archaeology and preservation activities matter, so that when we make those phone calls around the Historic Preservation Fund and the urgency around funding SIPOs and SHPOs, it connects more meaningfully to the legislator. It has a sense of place tied to it. It has meaning and impact tied to it. And it isn't just another phone call with more acronyms in it.
Are these visits something that the media gets invited to? Is that something the legislator would do?
These are not typically visits that the media
Right.
would be invited to. These are typically private visits. They would, if the legislator were to invite media along, they would have to let you know ahead of time. I have not personally seen media accompanying a legislator along to a project site visit. These are normally, private visits with constituents. If you do get a notification that the media is coming along, which again I would not expect to come, then partially because the legislator wants to be able to control any message that goes out to the media. So they're going to say, we can share photos and a debrief on what happened with media contacts after the visit. So if you do get a notification that that media is going to be present, let us know. I saw another comment about when you say reach out to us, what do you mean? It can be, if you're an ACRA member, reach out to Andrew and I. If you're an SAA member, reach out to David and Una. SHA member, reach out to the contacts over there. If you're a member of all three, whoever you feel comfortable with, or all of us. So we can help you navigate any media requests on that. But like I said, I do not think that you're going to necessarily be dealing with that because it's not standard for these types of visits.
Should we start with contacting the local offices of our congresspeople?
Yes, you're going to want to email the district scheduler. However, there will be some offices that only have one scheduler. I think for the most part, they have a district versus Washington, D.C. scheduler here now. But for, I would say, start with the local office and they may direct you to the DC scheduler and they'll tell you where to go.
Sure. Would it be helpful to remind representatives during the visits of the federal government's trust responsibility to tribes and therefore funding support for SHPOs?
If you're talking about a site that is has sort of a tribal a nexus, yeah, I think that's part of the again you sort of educating, and I think giving that perspective, understanding that this is not just a transactional relationship between a state and the federal or something or a grant, but this is a nation to nation contact and a relationship. I think that's helpful. I think a lot of members of Congress might not even know about that. I'd also suggest, and others can chime in, certainly if you're talking about a project that is on tribal land, I mean, absolutely you coordinate with either the TIPO if there is one or the tribe, and for, I would say my opinion is that they should probably be taking the lead on whether this happens, whether or not this happens if you're talking about something that is on tribal land.
Yeah, and I would add to that, just even if it's not on tribal land, but is a site that might have particular sensitivities to certain tribes. If you're working with a tribal representative at a site, even if it's not on tribal land, yes, you should interact with them before the visit. to make sure that it's okay with them. Yeah, could SAA and I guess and others assist with some group coordination within states?
I guess I'm not sure exactly what
Yeah,
that
I'm not
I
sure
think we'd
exactly.
have to hear more details. If you don't
I
mind reaching out to Dave with some
Right.
details about proposing, we're excited about this campaign. We really want to facilitate members being able to do this. So please reach out to us with your questions, with your proposal, so that we can figure out what we can do.
Right.
Yeah, I think there's another question talked about if you have multiple firms, let's say, or folks in a district or a state, and how you coordinate that. I mean, that may be what they're talking about if you have a few folks. And
Right.
you know, I say certainly, yeah, ideally, yeah, if you have a bunch of folks who are doing it, who want to do it, working in concert, certainly, makes sense as opposed to getting, separate visits. But again, as Dave said, if you haven't thought about how to do this or you're not sure, contact us and we're happy to walk through whatever the unique situations on the ground are.
Right. Well, and I will note that because of the way this campaign is structured, where you're having the legislator come to you, these aren't meetings at the district office for the legislator. If there was a meeting for the district office for the legislator, yes, absolutely, we would want multiple firms to coordinate with each other. But since if you're working together, teaming on a project, then yes, absolutely multiple firms working together to have them come to the project is definitely an aspect. But since it's most firms are going to be working on different projects, it's a little bit of a different situation. So yeah, happy to talk that through more. David, there was also a question further up about gifts.
Yeah, I was good. That was my next
I
one.
do think we should address that one. There are ethics rules surrounding what members of Congress can accept. Andrew, do you know what the cost limit is right now? It used to be 25, I thought, but
It, I want to say either 10 or 50. I mean, we could check. I mean, my advice is no, you don't need to give any gifts. There's no reason, it's not expected. So, I mean, anything bigger, of course, is illegal. There are de minimis things like a baseball cap, perhaps. I would just stay away from that. There's no need to do that. The gift, so to speak, is you're giving them an opportunity to see what's happening in the district and get a good photo op. So I would just sort of stay away from that completely. I would also add, I mean, I would not plan to do providing food or lunch or things like that. Yes, if it's a hot day, a bottle of water is, of course, perfectly fine. But don't think of this as sort of an event where you have to provide food. And in fact, there are ethics rules about that as well. So it's really it's focus on showing and information about the project and ultimately the connections to federal policy.
Should we coordinate with our federal contacts before the meeting? Should we do the same with our SHPO and, if applicable, any THPOs to let them know what's going on?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have the right answer to that. I think it's going to depend on the agency that you're working with. I will say that from the ones that we have done previously, I do not believe there was mass coordination with the SHPO and TIPOs and the federal agency themselves. Like David said, you should absolutely contact any, consulting party / tribes that may be affected by a visit, in case they do object to the visit. Andrew, David, I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on that. It's kind of a more of a it's your call kind of situation as to whether that's
Case by
necessary.
case basis, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, any stakeholders who are very much involved with the project, with the site, yeah, you should probably let them know. But certainly at the federal agency level, I don't think that's not necessary, and I don't, I don't think that's really something that you need to do. But again, it's case by case, and again, if you have questions about a specific project or a circumstance, we'd be happy to help.
I think that's it for the question list.
With 5 minutes to
Well,
spare.
I
Great.
appreciate everyone's time. I appreciate the presenters. I appreciate ACRA and SHA doing this with SAA. And I really hope our members take advantage of this incredibly sensitive moment of time that we are in to really help educate policymakers about the incredible work that you do.
And its value, not just to the economy, but to the nation as a whole, and its culture and its understanding of the past and the present. They need to know this information, and they need to know that they need to know how it's gathered and how it works, because it's just that critical. And these are definitely not ordinary times.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.